Placebo is based on three things. Number one is conditioning. You give someone a pill, and it's blue, and blue pills work better than red pills, and it has a certain drug in it, and you take that drug and changes some internal state. It reduces pain, or it takes away a symptom, and then you take it again, and then you take it again, and you take it again, and sooner or later you can actually replace that blue pill with just a blue pill with sugar in it. And the person takes it, and by conditioning, association, they begin to make the very chemicals based on the past, so stimulus response. So we could say then conditioning is based on the past. Now, expectation is the second element of the placebo, which means expectation then is when you're told something and you begin to expect an outcome, and you're selecting. That pill represents a new potential in the quantum field. And a certain percentage of those people will accept, believe, and surrender to the idea and begin to emotionally embrace the outcome. And if you combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion, you're moving into a new state of being. So now, as an example, as you begin to anticipate that occurring, your body's actually living in that future reality in the present moment, and your body begins to make the very chemicals to endorse that state of being. Now, who's doing the the fabrication of the chemicals? The I am within us, because it's always endorsing who we're being. So if conditioning is based on the past, then expectation is based on the future. The third thing is assigning meaning to things. If a doctor says, oh, this pill will actually increase serotonin in the receptors, and you have the pictures, and people look at it, and they start to think about it. When they take the pill, they're assigning meaning to it, and it turns out you can give someone a sugar pill, and it could be they could be told there's an antidepressant, and 81% of those people will get better by thought alone. 4 out of 5 people who are taking a pill that has nothing in it, that are told they're taking an antidepressant, 4 out of those 5 people will respond as well as people who are taking antidepressants.
That's amazing.
And many of those people will actually have functional brain scans to show that their brain is improved. In other words, it's not just in their mind, it's in their brain. And they're making their own antidepressants. So how does that work in terms of the state of being? Well, you combine that clear intention, getting clear, I could get well from this. You start feeling an elevated emotion like inspiration or joy or gratitude. You just move from living in your past to living in a new future. And when you move into that state of being, that intelligence that's giving you life, the I am, is going to organize your chemistry to reflect who you're being. Well, if you're taking a placebo, there are a certain percentage of people that will experience the nocebo. They'll experience the side effects of the very medication they think they're taking, because some people are optimists, some people are pessimists. And so a certain percentage of people will experience the side effects of dizziness and nausea. And, there are some very strong chemical correlations between withdrawals of certain medications that have a little bit more of an addictive tendency. The key is that when a person is experiencing, say, anxiety, and they're taking something to reduce their anxiety, or they have depression, they're taking something to stimulate their depression, they're believing that something outside of them is going to change their internal state. In many cases, it does. I start off my book with this story of a man who was diagnosed with cancer, and the doctor gave him a certain period of time to live. And when he got the diagnosis, he said, look, I just want to live long enough to make it through Christmas with my family. And after that, just can we, I don't care what happens, but can you keep me alive to that point? So they checked his values, and, he was doing okay. And a week after the sentence that he got on how long he would be living after the diagnosis, a week later he passed. But when they did the autopsy on him, he had no cancer, not even enough to kill him. So he died by thought alone. That's how powerful belief is. But I mean, you can take a group of people that have Parkinson's disease. And Parkinson's disease is deficiency in dopamine in the brain. When there's not enough dopamine in the brain, the upper motor neurons can't communicate with each other, and all of a sudden the motor neurons cause a spastic paralysis or tremors. People with Parkinson's can't control that with their conscious mind. So they did an experiment where they told these participants that they had one of the most powerful new drugs to treat Parkinson's. And after the saline injection, more than 50% of those people, all of their symptoms went away. This is the cool part of the story, because the doctors that did the experiment said, well, that's just the placebo. And one doctor said, well, okay, well, if their tremors went away, is it possible that they're making their own dopamine? So what they did was they found a radioactive chemical that fit into the same receptor sites as dopamine. So think of receptor sites as parking spaces. If the Parkinson's patients were making their own dopamine by thought alone, then dopamine would get to the parking spaces first. And when they injected the radioactive dye, there would be no radioactivity in the brain because dopamine got there first. If they weren't making their own dopamine, then there'd be a lot of parking spaces, and all of a sudden when they injected the radioactive dye, it would fit into those receptor sites, and when they imaged the brain would light up. Turns out these people were making 200 times the amount of dopamine just by thought alone. Now, there's a caveat to the story, because when those people returned back to their life, all of their symptoms came back. Now, the question is why? Because when they saw their caregiver, when they played chess with their friends, when they saw their spouse, when they slept in the same bed, the environment began to remind them by association who they were as an identity. And they returned back to their past biology. And of course then, the next question is, if the environment is that strong, it should be a good idea every single day that we change our state of being to be greater than our environment. So yes, people that are treating for chronic conditions, the question that I ask them is, tell me, how long do you think it took you to develop this condition? Tell me the choices that you made. Tell me how your stress levels were. Tell me about your past, your traumas. And they can tell a narrative that usually is years. And I always tell them, okay, so it took you 2 years or 3 years to create this condition. And you're going to have to turn this battleship around. And by turning it around to uncreate it, it's going to take you a little time. So every day, you have to overcome some aspect of yourself